Thank you so much for inviting me to this forum. I feel the weight of knowing that I represent one out of hundreds of thousands of Koreans who is sent overseas through international adoption. I'm an independent film director, and I have spent most of my adult life trying to find my way back to Korea to look for profound answers to my origin and heritage. Today I want to share some insight into the journey I've gone through, and also share some of my findings from making the documentary Forget Me Not, A Letter to My Mother. This is a highly personal film, but I seem to always find that anything related to adoption is extremely emotional, as it is about family. My official name is Hee Engelstoft. This name I have given myself. Before that I was Lisbeth Engelstoft, and before that I was Shin Sunny with the number K82C150. I don't know when I'm born. I don't know who gave me my name. I don't know who my parents are and who I'm related to. I don't know the medical history of my family, and I don't know if I will ever reconnect with anyone from my family or know the true story of my origin. My different names and numbers illustrate the different identities I've gone through, and all the things I don't know about myself. And wherever I turn, I can't get any answers. I will try and explain this. My Danish mother and father couldn't tell me about Korea, as their knowledge of it was minimal. They had never been to Korea. Throughout my school years, no one knew about my South Korean heritage, and information was scarce. But my job was also not to be Korean. My finest task was to become Danish, and I tried so hard, but there were simply things I couldn't change. When I came back to Korea for the first time when I was 20 years old, an older woman, a stranger in a supermarket, said to me that I had such a Korean face. And I started to cry. I had never felt this recognition of where I belonged. I was born in Busan in 1982, sent to Namkwang orphanage the day I was born, and adopted to Denmark through Holt International when I was 4 months old. I grew up as an only child with my two white parents in the countryside. Any other Korean I would encounter in Denmark for the first 15 years of my life would have been Koreans who were internationally adopted, living with a white Danish family. There are more than 8,000 Korean adoptees in Denmark, which is only a country of 5.5 million people. So long before Hyundai, Samsung, K-pop and Parasite, what South Korea was known for in Scandinavia was all the babies coming in, a transaction that has never stopped. I grew up with being told from my adopted parents that I was given away from my Korean mother as an act of love, that my biological mother wanted the best for me, and so she had given me away. For the first 20 years of my life, I never questioned this. It wasn't until I went to South Korea several times in my 20s and also attended the first IKAA gathering in Seoul with the delegation from the Danish association KoRoot that I was exposed to different perspectives on international adoption and really truly understood that I, as an individual, would never have been able to accumulate this much information about international adoption and the consequences of it without the collective work of the global adoptee community. I remember experiencing Korean women demonstrating in the streets in 2004 that they had their children stolen from them by adoption agencies. And I learned by accident that South Korea had institutions for pregnant women because I was on a motherland tour that had arranged a small field trip which ended up as such a home run by Catholic nuns. At that home, I met an 8 months pregnant woman who came over to me and asked me directly, "Are you happy to be adopted?" I didn't know what to answer her. First of all, no one ever asked me that. Secondly, her underlying question was, is it okay for me to give up my baby for adoption? To give it away? I had no good answer for her, but it changed my perspective from the narrative I grew up with. I suddenly understood that my identity issues were questions that were connected to other people than myself. It was connected to the mothers and their circumstances. I had to look elsewhere and outside of the adoptee community to find answers about adoption. After graduating from the National Film School of Denmark, I knew that I wanted to know much more about the women in South Korea. And because I couldn't find my mother or any other family there, I saw this as an opportunity to learn about what she might have gone through. Little did I know what I was about to encounter. Forget-me-not follows 3 women who have to make the decision of whether to keep their baby or give it up for adoption. None of them succeeds in keeping their children, although all of them want to. The film exposes how 3 young women end up losing their baby in 3 different ways. I discovered that there were over 50 institutions for pregnant women at the time, many of them not married. Over half of them were at the time run by adoption agencies who were known to reject taking women into their shelters if they wanted to keep their children. Later it became illegal for adoption agencies to run those shelters. The institutions were a place where the women could hide during their pregnancy. They would hide from their families, close environment, work, school, their boyfriends or partners. They would hide because they didn't find help anywhere, or they would be sent there by their family and told not to leave. Some of them came there voluntarily to get some peace and guidance of what to do. For some of the women it was a shelter, and for some it was a prison. Women of all ages and all layers of society came to stay at the shelter. In fact, it was such a diverse group that the only thing that they had in common was that they were women and they were pregnant or had already given birth. When I met Mrs. M, the director of the shelter, where the film is shot, she said she had always wanted someone to expose the women's conditions. She had encountered other adoptees and she really understood how much we needed to reconnect with Korea, the culture, but also understand the women she encountered in her work. She also thought that the women would be able to ask me questions in return. So she invited me to stay and live at the shelter, and this is what I did. I lived there on and off for 2 years, although the footage was filmed over 5 years. I don't speak Korean, and most of the women didn't speak English. But somehow we did communicate. For me it was eye-opening to be living with other Koreans and their babies, be familiar with their customs, and being racially mirrored and accepted as one of them. All of these experiences and the things I saw with my own eyes made me question everything I had been told about adoption, especially the phrase that my mother had given me away as an act of love. I had learned that women give up their children from desperation and blackmail. The women I encountered wanted to keep their children. They just didn't get the help they needed. If some women stated that they didn't want to keep their child, it was because they were told that their future and everything they ever dreamed about would disappear, and their families would cut all ties with them. There is no doubt in my mind and heart that international adoption is a violation of human rights. It is both a violation towards mothers and fathers forced to relinquish their babies. It's a violation of human rights towards the babies that will have no way of knowing fundamental knowledge about themselves, their families, and their culture. It will affect my children not to know their Korean heritage. Time has changed. South Korea is rich and has one of the lowest birth rates in the world. So why not try and solve this issue by protecting and taking care of the babies born in this country, instead of sending them away, then include them in society and let them be part of the Republic of Korea, as they were meant to be. Support vulnerable mothers and fathers who need support of keeping their babies by giving them options and social security. Give them possibilities to advance in society so they can provide for their children. Here is a 3-minute trailer for Forget Me Not, a letter to my mother. I hope you will watch the whole film and share with your colleagues, friends and families. Thank you for your time. 감사합니다.
Mor, hvordan traf du det valg? Hvordan kan man give sit barn væk?
지금 이제 결정을 하게 되면 나중에 이게 나한테 어떤 이점이 있을까? 행복할 것 같아요. 여기를 잘 별일 없도록 잘 도와주십시오 이렇게 하는 거예요. 여기는 아기와 엄마들 건강하게 잘 도와주십시오.
집에서 반대하면 설득할 자신 있어? 힘들겠지?
근데 진짜 엄마 아빠만 허락하면 키우고 싶은데
모든 엄마들이 반드시 아기를 키워야 된다라는 생각을 하는 사람이에요. 아기를 키운다면 억지로 아버지 생각은 억지로 떼어놓겠다.
Kan man give sit barn væk i kærlighed? Jeg prøver at forstå dig. Det gør jeg virkelig.